What's up guys, Lifting here, welcome back to the Path of Exile full tutorial series. This is the third chapter in the series, and just like the last time we're going to continue exactly where we left off in the previous episode. This time we will start by heading towards the Axiom Prism, where Brutus, the first real boss of the game, awaits us. While doing so, I will talk briefly about what you need to be aware of if you want to be efficient while leveling. And finally, after hopefully defeating Brutus, we will receive our first support gem. And so we're going to talk about how skill gems work and interact with each other, as it is a major part of building one's character in Path of Exile. Before we take the waypoint to the ledge, we are however going to spend the 5 skill points we gained in the previous episode. You should of course always try to spend your skill points as soon as you get them, but for educational purposes I have saved these for now. And as you may remember from the previous episode, this is going to be a life and armor focused, two-handed physical damage dealing cyclone build. This means that by picking up any skill node that benefits physical damage like these and life and armor like these will benefit and scale our type of build. So we're gonna do that. This leaves us with 2 points left to spend, and I want to get out of the duelist starting area and pick up some of the more efficient points further down here. This gives us the option of branching into more physical damage or some more attack speed. We already know that physical damage benefits our build, but what about attack speed? In this case it does, and that is because Cyclone is a melee attack skill, as opposed to Fireball for instance, which is considered a spell skill. A spell doesn't benefit from attack speed, but rather cast speed, so it's important to distinguish between the two. So in this case it doesn't really matter too much if we choose the attack speed and branch into Art of the Gladiator, or the physical damage node and branch into Master of the Arena. Both of these notables are highly beneficial for this build, and we will eventually be getting both. It is a simple matter of which one we will be picking up first. But for now I'm gonna pick up the physical damage node, and then Master of the Arena, which is going to increase life regeneration, melee physical damage, weapon range, which basically allows you to reach a target further away, and it grants us some additional strength, all useful for this build. And there's more to the whole weapon range thing, but I'm going to go into further detail about that in a later video. Alright, let's move out, and we're going to take the waypoint to the ledge. At the waypoint here you need to look for these stone pillars, as they indicate which way you need to go to find the entrance to the next zone, the climb. Basically you need to run in their direction and you will get there. And as we progress through the climb here, I will talk briefly about what you can do to be time efficient when leveling. When progressing in Path of Exile, you should always try to be as efficient with your time as possible. And by that I mean getting as much experience as you can within the shortest amount of time. To be efficient you need to focus on killing packs or groups of monsters rather than distractors or lone monsters wandering around, as these are simply not worth your time. As a general rule of thumb, you want to kill the monsters if there is 3 or 4 or more and skip them if less. This also means that if you encounter a large group of monsters and kill 10 out of 11, then it is typically best to just keep going after that instead of dedicating time to finish off that last remaining monster. And unless you are mapping, which we'll be talking about later, you shouldn't try to clear areas. You should simply progress as fast as you can. Besides that, it's almost always a good idea to dedicate time to kill magic or blue packs of monsters, as these provide 3.5 times more experience than regular monsters. A rare monster grants 5.5 times more experience, however these are often by themselves and are not always time efficient to kill. They do however have other benefits, such as a better chance of getting loot, more flash charges in return, and so forth. So there's still good incentive to kill these when you encounter them. So now that we have headed through the wall and into the lower prison, our objective is to locate and kill the prison warden, Brutus. That said, we need to find the entrance to the upper prison first, and then from here find the warden's chambers. Oh, and it's also here in the lower prison that you can find the first of the 6 ascendancy trials that are required to complete before you can enter the Lord's Labyrinth. But we'll talk more about that in a future episode. For now we're going to skip it. Anyway, once you enter the warden's chambers, you will soon encounter Piety. From here simply run past her, then left, and run towards the direction where she stood. By the time you get here she'll be gone, and you should then head toward the back of the chamber. Here you need to follow the blood trail on the ground, as it will lead you directly to your final destination within the prison where Brutus awaits you. Now this fight can be somewhat challenging if not prepared, especially on the later difficulties. It is very important that you pay attack to his attack animation. First of all, he can pull you towards him using his chain attack, leaving you in a position for him to hit you. Secondly, he will occasionally charge up a fairly slow but very hard-hitting ground slam attack that you need to do your best to dodge, and as the fight progresses, Brutus will also start using spike traps and spawn skeletons to aid him against you. Fortunately, these skeletons will, as they are killed, grant flash charges, which actually makes the fight somewhat easier. Brutus himself deals physical damage, and because of that, anything that mitigates or reduces incoming physical damage is very powerful against him. And this includes having a high armor count, endurance charges, fortify, and so forth. For the later difficulties, using a granite or basalt flask is a great way of mitigating his damage for most builds as well, so keep that in mind. Alright, now that he has been defeated, let's get out of the prison. To do that, we're simply going to relock, as once you defeat Brutus you will automatically obtain the waypoint to the next zone, the Prisoner's Gate, and this will allow us to save the portal scroll and still get us back to town, and it's even a little more time efficient if you're racing. Now that we're back, we're going to grab our quest reward from Nessa for dealing with Brutus. She will offer us 3 different support gems, which makes this a perfect time to talk about how skill gems works in this game. But first let's choose our reward, and in this case we'll go with added fire damage, which basically adds a portion of physical damage as extra fire damage to our attacks. So first of all, there are 3 different base types of skill gems in Path of Exile, the red, green and blue ones. The color is indicative of the attribute they are aligned with. Red is strength, green is dexterity, and blue is intelligence based. A red gem will typically have a higher strength requirement to use, whereas the green and blue gems will often have a higher dexterity and intelligence requirement to use. Besides that, their color is also indicative of which sockets they can fit into, of course. Then besides the color difference, there are also 2 types of categories of gems in Path of Exile. Active skill gems such as Molten Strike, the skill we're currently using, and support gems such as the added fire damage gem we just picked up. Active skill gems are skills that can be directly used as an ability. When equipped into a socket, you'll be able to select that ability on the skill bar and use it actively. This can be anything from Molten Strike to Ice Nova, Tornado Shot and so forth. All of these skills can be actively used and placed on your hotbar. A support gem on the other hand does nothing by itself. Instead it supports, hence the name obviously, and it influences or buffs the active skill gems that they are linked with. In this case I have my Molten Strike gem in my armor, and when I then add the added fire damage to the other red linked socket, it will now exert and benefit my Molten Strike active ability. Linking an active skill gem with another active skill gem doesn't make any difference, however. So in order to make our skill as powerful as possible, we will want to link our active skill gems with as many support gems, and the right ones of course, as possible. Now the easiest way to figure out if a support gem works for your ability or active skill gem is to compare the active skill gem's keywords to the support gem's keywords. These keywords indicate if there is a connection between the gems and if the active skill gem can benefit from being linked to the support gem. So since we will be using Cyclone later for our build, let's use that as an example here. When looking at the keywords for Cyclone, we can see it has attack, AoE, movement and melee. And basically this means that Cyclone is a movement skill which deals AoE damage with melee attacks. So that means that if you can find a support gem that grants bonuses to attacks, area of effect, movement or melee attacks, then it's most likely going to support Cyclone. An example of this could be the support gem Melee Physical Damage, which has the keywords Melee, Support and Attack. Support obviously indicates that it is a support gem, but the Melee and Attack keyword indicates that this support gem is going to benefit an active melee and attack based skill gem. Another example could be the Increased Area of Effect support gem, which shares the keyword AoE. In this case, it will grant Cyclone a larger area of effect when linked together. In most cases, these keywords will be indicative of whether or not there is synergy between the active skill gem and the support gem. That said, there are situations where it requires you to read a little further to figure out if it actually works. In our case, we just picked up added fire damage as a support gem, but the keywords doesn't state if it works with melee, spells or projectiles. Instead it simply says support and fire. The reason for this is simply that this support gem isn't limited to a certain type of attack, but by reading the skill description we can see that it gains a certain amount of physical damage as extra fire damage, which means that in order for this support gem to work, the damage source of the active skill gem needs to be physical. So if your character is dealing purely lightning damage, there's simply no physical damage it can add as extra fire damage. So it's important to always take note of what damage type the active skill gem utilizes in your build and if the support gem benefits this. And now this is a fairly complex system, guys, and no one expects you to understand this right away. We will be talking much more about this in later episodes, but for now I think we covered the basics, and with that said we're going to end today's episode, once again standing in Lion's Eyes Watch. Today we talked more about how to allocate your skill points and what you need to be aware of when doing so. We talked about being efficient with your time while leveling. We defeated our first real boss, Brutus, and we talked briefly about the fight and what you need to be aware of. And finally, we started on the topic of the skill gem system in Path of Exile, although there's much more to say about that in later episodes. In the next episode we will head back into the ship graveyard where we left off, have a talk with Captain Fairgraves, talk about what you can do if you allocated your skill points wrongly, change up our skills and start looking for certain types of gear that will make it easier for us when we need to stand face to face with the Act 1 boss, Merveil. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, subscribe if you want to see more, thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?